Hello. So how was your week?
My week was good.
Okay.
Yeah, I've actually had quite a bit of patience with ED, so I think it's a timely discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that Sally also joined.
Thank you. Thank you. How are
Okay,
you?
then nothing. Fine, thank you.
Okay.
Shall we start?
Yeah.
Okay, can somebody tell me the definition?
So it would be an inability to sustain an erection.
Hmm.
Yes, so either completely or partially.
Okay, completely or partially. What about Sally? Do you have any definition?
An inability to achieve or sustain erection for
Okay.
adequate sexual performance.
Okay. So shall we read the actual definition?
Yes.
Okay. Its inability, as you said, is to achieve or maintain the erection that is satisfactory for sexual performance. Okay, so it is not a very well-defined definition, but primarily it just talks about the adequacy of the performance. Okay. And what are the types of erections you have? Is it just a common, I mean, just one way of having erection, or there are many ways of doing it?
Is there, sorry, I might need to ask that again.
Okay, what are the types of erections? So how does erection occur? Yeah. You're able to see the slides, no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So erection could be reflex or psychogenic.
Yeah. So basically what happens is that it's local factors, which is related to the peripheral nerves and spinal cord. And also there are psychological factors primarily initiated from the limbic system. So both can occur. Say even if you do not feel like having it because of emotions or psychological effect, it can still induce erection by local effects. Okay. Have you ever seen erections occurring under anesthesia?
Yes, after spinal.
Yeah. So spinal, obviously, when they're having spinal, they're not having any sexual thoughts or any erotic thoughts. But then that is due to the reflex erection, which occurs naturally. So how common do you think is the problem? Is it a common problem or not such a common problem?
Yeah. I think it becomes very common after 40, 45 years.
Okay. How common is it?
Well,
It's one way of finding out whether somebody is telling a lie or not. See, the mild to moderate erectile dysfunction is present in almost half the men between 40 to 70. It is much more after 70. But do you think if you just go and ask anybody whether they have any erectile dysfunction, would they admit it or they don't?
They won't.
Yeah. So what percentage you think won't admit? Unless you sort of ask poking questions and they're confident to share the information.
Yeah. Probably the 50 of the 52%.
Okay, it's actually almost 80%. So it's a very common condition, although people might not want to admit it. But then, there are people who call themselves andrologists and they make a lot of money because they deal with the erectile dysfunction. And obviously, it increases with the age. But then the most severe form occurs in various studies, which ranges from 6 to 30%. So either the moderate form or even severe form is a fairly common thing. Okay. And how do you assess the severity? There is you remember the prostate scores, international prostate score. Similar to that, there's International Index of Erectile Function. So here, if you have a lower score, it means it's more severe. So 1 to 7 is severe dysfunction, 8 to 11 is moderate, 12 to 16 is mild to moderate, and more than 22, there is no erectile dysfunction. So this is, if you want to do any studies or evaluate properly, you can use this severity score. But then mild to moderate is fairly common, which means a score of less than 16 is present in almost half the men above 40. Especially the older they are, the more common it is. So what is the etiology? Let's see how old you are. Did I say you, is psychogenic more common or organic causes more common? What do you think?
Organic.
Psychogenic.
Organic, okay. What about Dr. Elijah?
Yeah, I would think psychogenic is more common.
Psychogenic.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, it looks like the other way. See, earlier people used to say psychogenic causes are more common. And then recently they have found organic causes are much more common than psychogenic causes. Okay, so then what are the other causes? Because there are non-endocrine causes, endocrine causes. So what do you think the endocrine causes?
Diabetes.
Okay, yeah, the diabetes does, but then it's more related to hypogonadism or less testosterone. Of course, diabetes also is an endocrine disorder which affects the nerves. And non-endocrine is vascular, veno-occlusive, neurogenic, or iatrogenic. But the most important thing they found in recent days is that it's actually an indicator of endothelial dysfunction. So what do you understand by endothelial dysfunction? Especially related to the vascular cause of erectile dysfunction. Okay, well, if endothelial dysfunction, what is the disease you commonly associate with?
Maybe vascular.
Yeah, vascular. So coronary artery disease or coronary occlusive disease. That's actually, it's a recent finding that they are closely interlinked because both are due to endothelial dysfunction. So in fact, one of the important things they found is that 70% of those who have a coronary artery disease have preceding erectile dysfunction. And almost half the patients with chest pain are likely to have erectile dysfunction. So what does it indicate? And again, one of the things is if they are in the men over 40, if they have erectile dysfunction, they have a 50-fold risk of coronary artery disease. So the important thing to notice is that it can be a precursor or an indicator of coronary artery disease. So if somebody complains of recent onset of erectile dysfunction, they better go and evaluate properly for coronary artery disease. Because this occurs prior to the coronary artery disease. So it's important that way. So how does what is the mechanism of erection and flaccid state? So normally you'd expect muscle contraction to cause rigidity. But does that occur here?
No.
Or is it the opposite?
Well, rigidity is because of blood flow to the corpora.
Yeah. So basically, what happens is that in the erect state or rigid state, blood flows a lot of blood flows into the penis, and the outflow is blocked. So then it stays. All the blood stays inside and becomes stiff. So actually, to start that, you need the smooth muscle contraction. The relaxation. So normally the smooth muscle in a state of contraction, which allows the outflow comfortably. While during erection, it relaxes, which allows blood to come in and prevents the blood from going in. And again, it is controlled by noradrenaline, the intrinsic myogenic control, and various endothelial contracting factors. And one of the most important factor which is involved in the erection is nitric oxide. And of course, they have acetylcholine from the cholinergic nerves. These also initiate the smooth muscle relaxation, which starts erection. And then once the lacunar spaces are filled, it leads to compression of the subcunical venules and backflow of the blood, which sustains the erection. So do you understand what is happening? So first, the smooth muscle needs to relax, which is initiated by nitric oxide and the cyclic AMP and the various factors. Then it leads to filling of the lacunar spaces, which compresses the blood vessel, which take blood out of the penis. So the erection is maintained. And what about why is, how does the psychogenic problem occur? What happens with when you are stressed, or when you are depressed, or when you are anxious? What happens? What chemical is secreted?
Adrenaline.
Yeah, adrenaline and noradrenaline, any of the sympathomimic drugs. They cause, what do they cause? They cause contraction of the smooth muscles everywhere, which includes the smooth muscles in the penis. So when the smooth muscle contracts, what happens?
The outflow is open.
Yeah. So then it actually, that's what causes the flaccid state, which again is understandable because when you're under stress, when you want to run away or something, when the sexual desire will be the last thing will be in your mind. Even if you're anxious, if you're stressed, it's a flight and fight response. So that's how the psychogenic one acts. What about the neurogenic? What happens with the neurogenic causes? Because we said initially we said there are two types. One is the local erections which occur, which is limited to the peripheral nerves and the spinal cord. So these are affected by any of the spinal cord injuries or multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, lumbar disc disease, any trauma, and even injury to the local nerves. Like if we do a radical prostatectomy, the cavernous nerves can be affected. And diabetes again causes peripheral neuropathy. And all this will reduce nitric oxide load, which is necessary for erections. So when there is less nitric oxide, there is less erection or erectile dysfunction. What about the vasculogenic causes? How does this occur? So how does the vasculogenic causes affect or cause erectile dysfunction?
Blocking inflow, right?
Yeah. So it's like like coronary artery. What happens? The inflow vessel is blocked, so there is less blood going to the heart muscles. So here the same thing. If there is a block in the parental vessels, and less blood comes in. So do you think and the risk is high with the hypertension, the threefold risk with hypertension, and almost 2.5, 2.5 or threefold risk with diabetes and dyslipidemia, and even hypertensive medicines. these decrease the amount of flow. So what will be the difference between the problems which cause erectile dysfunction with the vasculogenic or neurogenic or psychogenic? History, what I mean, from the history of dysfunction, how will you differentiate these three?
So for psychogenic, there would be reflex, there will still be reflex erections.
Yeah, see, the psychogenic, I mean, it's actually a sudden onset of dysfunction. Because otherwise they are normal. Suddenly they have adrenaline rush or noradrenaline rush, then they get this thing. So when does this occur normally? So the typical patient would present is somebody who's either not married or married and wants to have an extramarital affair or something like that. Then they will have a severe, they won't have any erection at all because they are under great stress, increased adrenaline, noradrenaline, and all this stress. And then this causes a positive feedback cycle. So the next time they're even more stressed when they try. So this they keep on trying, then they become more and more difficult to sustain erections. So this is a common classic way patients with psychogenic erectile dysfunction will present. Neurogenic, of course, it's fairly easy because you'll have some causes for it. So here what happens is that if they have erotic stimuli or they're emotionally involved, they can still have some amount of erection which are mediated through limbic system. And what about vasculogenic erection? Erectile dysfunction, how will that manifest?
They'll be incomplete, right? They won't have any erections at all.
See, that is true of psychogenic, because the smooth muscle, and it is totally doesn't, it contracts, and there's no erection at all. But here the problem is primarily with the inflow to the penis. So the insufficient blood coming. So here getting the erections is not a problem. But then the quality of the erection is deficient if there is a vasculogenic cause. Only if there is sufficient blood, it can block the venules and block the outflow. But if there is insufficient blood filling the cavernous tissue, then what happens? Again, it's not tense, and there is also continuous venous leak. And recently they have found this is probably the most common cause of erectile dysfunction, almost 70%. And what about iatrogenic causes? This, of course, is neurogenic, which are related to any radical pelvic surgery or cavernous nerve or pudendal arterial injuries. But the same can also occur with the pelvic fractures. And there are some medications which are supposed to cause erectile dysfunction, like antihypertensives, diuretic, some of the antipsychotic medicine, digoxin, and opiates. But what is the problem with blaming the medication? Yeah. So except for digoxin, we're not sure whether it is the medication which causes erectile dysfunction or the original problem itself which causes the dysfunction. Like if we have hypertension, which is one of the causes for erectile dysfunction. And if antihypertensive also causes erectile dysfunction, then you're in a lose-lose situation. So whatever you do, you're not going to win. And what about endocrine causes? So this can also lead to erectile dysfunction, because as you grow older, the androgens are less. And which is the other situation when you have endocrine problem? Which is the other situation where decreased androgens suddenly come?
You have
Testicular diseases.
Pardon me?
What? Testicular diseases.
Okay, testicular diseases, sometimes even without testicular diseases.
castration,
Okay, what do you do if there is a CA prostate?
castration.
So castration, whether it's medical or surgical, that again leads to decreased androgens. Okay. So castration, they have found that there is a decreased arterial flow, decreased venous occlusion, and drop in intracavernous pressure. So this also leads to decreased nitric oxide synthetase and so on. But recently they have found that if they stimulate the cavernous nerve, this can be reversible for a time. But then testosterone therapy again is controversial, because obviously when say CA prostate, you don't want the testosterone. That's why you castrate them. But even otherwise, with the old age, like in hormonal therapy for postmenopausal women, testosterone therapy in men also is controversial for the sake of erectile function. What are the risk factors? Which is similar to sort of coronary artery disease, any alcohol intake, smoking, obesity, diabetes, metabolic syndrome. All these are factors for vasculogenic dysfunction. And of course, BPH and urinary problems, they also can cause erectile dysfunction. And then, of course, for psychogenic thing, if they have any psychogenic or relationship factors. So what do you mean, clinically, what do you look at? Clinical examination. What do you generally investigate for? Okay, one is, they have any signs of hypogonadism.
Yeah.
Okay, and if they have gynecomastia and those sort of things. But of course, the primary evaluation, because most of the erectile dysfunction are related to cardiac problems. So you have to make sure that cardiac status is all right. Then, of course, there are local factors in the penis which can cause erectile dysfunction. These are, what is Peyronie's disease?
Curvature of the penis.
Yeah, because of scarring. Then, of course, if there is phimosis, if there is frenulum breve, what does that mean?
A brief, short frenulum.
Yeah. So all this can cause local pain during sexual activity, and that can also be related to erectile dysfunction. And what about the lab tests? What do you do when somebody comes? So the most important thing is to rule out coronary arterial disease. So you do cholesterol, triglycerides, and all those things which are related to that, chest X-ray, ECG, and all that thing. And you also do evaluate for diabetes, because diabetes is another important cause of erectile dysfunction. And when do you do testosterone or prolactin and thyroid hormones and all that? Normally, you don't have to do it for all the patients. Only in specific circumstances, if you suspect. Because if there are not many instances where it is low and they give testosterone and the function improves. What about these specialized tests? Penile ultrasound, NPT, arteriography, MRI, and all that. These are the tests which are done in specialized centers. So what is the information will they give?
About flow and
yeah. See, the arteriography and infusion capnography can mean, if there is any venous leak, which is fairly uncommon, that can be indicated. And what about NPT? What will that indicate? See, they have a normal NPT and they have complaint of erectile dysfunction. What does that mean?
Would mean it's psychogenic.
Yeah, it's more psychological or psychogenic. But without the test, is it possible to find that out?
Yes.
Yeah, because history alone, they'll be, in fact, other people might not notice it, but these people, because otherwise, since they have erectile dysfunction, they'll definitely notice sometime when they get up in the morning, they have a nice hard erection. So these are things which are done in specialized thing, but not all that necessary. So now coming on to the treatment, how can you treat all this?
Yes, what do you mean by NPT?
Nocturnal penile tumescence. So there is a special instrument which you attach to the penis, and you go off to sleep with that. It will keep recording in the computer. And if you have an erection, they'll record the erection. So that will just help you to find out if when do they have erection? Why do they have erection in the night?
It's from reflex.
No, reflex. See, generally REM sleep.
Yeah.
Normally in the morning.
Yeah, so in the morning. So you may see you have 1 or 2 cycles of sleep. The sleep cycle, the last period is the rapid eye movement sleep when you have dreams. And that is the time they might, very often people have erections. And that's why suddenly they wake up and they found they have erection. But this one, NPT, will help you to prove that. They have an official record of the erection. Thank you. What about how does lifestyle modification help? Which is basically 30 minutes of moderate aerobic exercise, Mediterranean diet, stopping smoking and alcohol and all that. So how does this improve?
Well, I think the exercise helps with blood flow, but also stress relief.
So exercise is the only thing, even if there is, even in coronary arterial disease, if there is plaques, if there is deficient blood flow, exercise is the only thing which can reverse the damage. And of course, exercise makes you feel better, produces hormones that make you feel well and so on. And earlier, before the recent medications came, acupuncture and yohimbine were tried for erectile dysfunction. And these, when they compare with the placebo studies, they are found to be 40 to 50% effective, while placebos were effective in 10 to 15% people. So obviously, we don't know how the acupuncture works, but yohimbine has PDE5 detectors in it. So what are the medicines you have heard of for erectile dysfunction?
Viagra, sildenafil.
Yeah, Viagra, sildenafil is the first one which came. Okay, these are called phosphodiesterase inhibitors. So they increase, they lead to buildup of cyclic GMP and later which leads to nitric oxide, which is the substance which initiates erection. Okay. So how do you give Viagra or sildenafil?
A tablet like 30 minutes thereabouts before intended coitus.
30 minutes. Then it may not work. Okay, usually it has to be given about 2 hours.
2 hours.
Yeah, and the other thing is it gets absorbed better if it's on empty stomach. So if you're using sildenafil and vardenafil and all these medicines, you need to prepare for it in the sense that you need to be fasting. You need to take it 2 hours prior to it. But then that is not a very convenient way of doing it. But then there is a medicine called tadalafil, which can be given daily, because this also has benefit with patients with BPH.
Yeah.
So here, it doesn't have to be given when the erection occurs, even if you're taking it daily. You don't have to be sort of prepared like the other ones. And when is it contraindicated? Especially if they on nitrates for coronary artery disease, it can lead to actually more of the coronary artery problem. So that needs to be avoided. And how effective all these PDE5 medicines are. Overall, about 60% of the patients are quite happy with it. And especially if sufficient time, which is about 2 hours, is given for the erection to occur. And if these are not effective, then what happens? 40% obviously is not effective. Then what do you do after this? Okay, first you try the older methods, maybe lifestyle modification, then acupuncture or Yohin, then these medicines. Okay, you can either have, when you're planning for it, you can have it, or daily dose. Next. Then the other thing is, then you go to the various devices. So one of the most commonly used devices is the vacuum erection devices. So if you look at the picture, the one suction is applied and vacuum is created. It draws the blood into the penis. And then once blood comes in, then you have a band here, constriction band, which prevents a leak. So here it's important to sort of, the constriction band has to fit properly. So let's say you need to trim the pubic hair. And sufficient lubrication is necessary because the erection is not as good as a normal erection. But then it suffices, and about 75% of the people who use it are quite happy with it. But then they also found that after some time, about a third of them will discontinue the use. And have you heard of these intraurethral suppositories? So where do you normally use suppositories?
Correct.
But here, what happens if we give local prostaglandins? This increases the intracellular levels of cyclic AMP, which again leads to increase in nitric oxide. So this is about 50% effective on its own. And it adds a little more efficacy when combined with the PDE inhibitors. So when we said the PDE inhibitors like Viagra and all that has only about 60% effectiveness. For rest of the people, you can add intraurethral suppository if that is insufficient. But then you have to remember that this can cause priapism, pain, and giddiness also. If this also doesn't work, what is the next step? So the first step is to try.
What's the component?
Anything to say, Dave?
The component of the suppository.
It prostaglandins. Yeah, prostaglandin E1. Okay, what else can we do? Is there anything, or we can
vacuum? You can do a vacuum.
Yeah.
Hello?
See, the interest suppository is, when you can try only after a vacuum. So the first you try the lifestyle modification.
In his staff parking. See me in his staff.
Huh? Pardon me?
Sorry, Dr. Jana.
Yeah. Okay. So then next, actually, the most satisfactory erection occurs with the intracavernosal injections. So those days we used to inject just papaverine. So you can inject either prostaglandins or mixture of papaverine and phentolamine, or a mixture of prostaglandin, papaverine, and phentolamine. And these had to be initially titrated and given under supervision. But then this is effective in 94% of the patients with erectile dysfunction. But then the problem is it's an invasive procedure, and not very many people are happy about injecting themselves, even though inject with a very small needle. And if you use too much, again, it can cause injuries, scarring, infection, and so on. So the dropout rate also is fairly high, from 40 to 80% dropout rate is there with the intracameral injection. But where does this benefit most? Which group of people will it benefit? Which group do you think will benefit by intracavernosal injections?
The ones with inflow problems, vasculogenic. Vasculogenic.
Okay, vasculogenic also will act quite well, but it's mostly useful for patients with psychogenic problems, because they just need to know that they can have proper erections. So as I said initially, it occurs in some other people who are very anxious to prove that they have erections. Then before marriage, they'll go and try somewhere, they'll fail. Then they'll become more anxious, try once more, they'll fail, and they'll be depressed after that, and this thing. To those people, if they once show that, okay, they have erection which is normal and good, then that is sufficient. So even though its satisfaction is almost 94% or 95%, it is useful only as a short-term measure. And what about penile implants? You have two types of implants. One is that it's malleable devices, which can be bent for normal use, and if they want to have erection, they can keep it straight and have erection. Or there are two-piece inflatable devices, which has a reservoir, and when necessary, you can make it. But then these are very expensive, and they do have a significant mechanical failure and reoperation, which can be as high as 80% in some series. But of course, these are tried only in patients who have contraindications for medical treatment, or if locally there is a significant problem. You're asking something? And then what about penile revascularization? So this is also a rare cause of erectile dysfunction. So like how we do revascularization surgery for coronary arteries. From inferior epigastric artery, they either revascularize dorsal artery of the penis or arterialization of the deep dorsal vein. This is either combined with or without venous ligation. But here again, it's a fairly complex. We look at the picture. You need to have so many incisions, and it's a difficult procedure to do. And overall sexual satisfaction after the procedure is only about 12%. So it's not a very popular one or useful one. So what is the take-home points from erectile dysfunction? So it is a significant problem which can occur in almost half the men between 40 to 70. And it's one of the leading causes of anxiety and depression. It's not a serious disease like coronary artery disease, But the thing is, it can be the precursor of coronary artery disease. So if somebody has erectile dysfunction, which is a recent onset, you should do complete proper evaluation for coronary artery disease, which might follow. And most of the interventions, what they found in large meta studies is that the dropout rate of any intervention is fairly high. Because once they're not anxious anymore, then the men are quite happy not to have sexual intercourse after that. And they do what is called a marital adjustment test. After some time, both the partners become, they sort of accept the dysfunction and they're quite happy. I mean, they go on, get on with life with that. But the interesting fact is that people who take PDE inhibitors like Viagra and all, the women are much more happy when the partners take it. And what is new in that? See, now they have these ROCK inhibitors, guanyl cyclase activators. These are all medicines which are new and they're still under clinical trial. Then people also tried umbilical cord stem cells or bone marrow cells, which are given intravenously. And the one of the new thing which they have been trying is the low intensity extracorporeal shockwave therapy. So this also seems to, these are all under research. They're not proved things, but these are things which are being tried. Any questions or doubts?
Yeah, what are you shocking now when you use the ESW? When you use the lithotripsy, what are you?
The penis.
Yeah, what are you
Low
breaking down?
intensity. Yeah.
Mhm.
Because see, one other thing is, of course, it may not be true, but ESWL is a very expensive machine.
Mm.
And unless they have very, very huge turnover, nobody makes profit from it.
Mm.
So they're trying to find other uses so that the machine can continuously be used. So, and they found that one study, they found that it did help. So do you people see erectile dysfunction commonly or not so common?
No, quite a bit.
Okay. So what do you do? And now with this knowledge, what are you planning to do? It's a common problem all over the world. It is there because he said almost half the men between 40 to 70 will have this.
But people don't talk about it.
Hmm?
They don't talk about it yet. They don't say it out.
You don't see that much.
They don't say it. They don't tell us they have it.
Okay. But once you do some advertising or when you start doing some procedures, then people will come open up. So what are possible in your places? See, one of the things that you can start doing this is what do you call that intracavernous injections. You can either papaverine is an old medicine which is available, either phentolamine or prostaglandin or a mixture. So this once, this will help in a lot of patients who have psychogenic problems. Because once it's a short-term thing, once you show them that they can have sufficient erection, that is enough for them. Okay. And what about PDE? This also helps, especially if they have old people with prostate problem. You can try the second one or the regular ones, tadalafil, you can try. Or the Viagra and sildenafil and other things can be tried. Now, of course, very often just talking to them and finding out the problem and explaining to them is enough to sort of make them understand the problem, and that should help most of the people. Any
When
other?
do you decide to use tadalafil for a longer time?
Sildenafil.
When do you decide to use tadalafil for a longer period rather than a shorter time for?
See, the patient have concomitant BPH.
Hmm.
So because it is supposed to help with the BPH also. So and it has additional benefit of helping with the erectile dysfunction. And of course, the important thing is to remember is that it can be a precursor for coronary artery disease. So you need to carefully evaluate for them. And see, one of the times when usually during sexual intercourse is a time when many of them can have a heart attack also. Okay, for next week, do you have any topics you're interested in, or?
Yeah, so something close to this one would be premature ejaculation, but I don't know whether that's urology or psychiatry.
Okay.
Yeah. I
That's part
don't
of.
don't see many patients, but like last week I had a young man
Okay.
who was really bothered about his premature ejaculation.
Okay.
Hmm.
So that is actually it's more psychological. So what did you advise them?
Yeah, I sent him to a psychiatrist.
Okay. See, what they need to do is to stimulate less.
Hmm.
So how can you stimulate less?
Well,
It's a
maybe
simple
not
solution. Yeah.
foreplay.
Avoid foreplay because see, the thing is they get excited fast. They have too much of stimulus, and which rapidly progresses to ejaculation.
Hmm.
So you need to decrease the sensations.
Mm-hmm.
So what can be done to decrease the sensation? A simple method. You can give 5% xylocaine jelly, local anesthesia.
Mm.
So that helps. In fact, it benefits ladies in that it's a better lubrication is there, and the guys will have less sensation. That's a simple, but quite often that helps. Then you should advise them to, because once they penetrate, to sort of think of something else, not related to the sexual this thing they're having or some other trend, decrease the attention. And if they are again, if they have a foreskin which totally covers the penis, once you take it out during the sexual intercourse, the glands become very sensitive.
Yeah.
So again, doing a circumcision also helps them in some ways, because then the sensations are not so much. Okay,
So in this case,
if the psychiatrist, not every this thing, you can call them back and ask them to try this thing. You can try with the local anesthetist first. 2% generally doesn't suffice, but you can give 5% jelly.
Okay.
Okay, then if nothing else is there, then we'll see next week.
All right. Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Good
Bye.
night.